The road to Centralia feels wrong before you even see the first crumbled house. It's quiet, too quiet for a place. That was once a thriving coal town in the Pennsylvania hills. Wild grass claws through cracked pavement, and faded stop signs point toward streets that no longer exist. On a breezy evening, mist curls low to the ground. But it's not just mist, it's smoke. It seeps from fissures in the earth, carrying with it the acrid tang of something ancient and angry, burning coal. Stand still long enough, and you'll hear it, deep beneath your feet, a faint, otherworldly roar. Locals say it's like the sound of a freight train in the distance, or sometimes a whispering crowd. But there's no train here anymore. There's barely a town. Centralia's story begins like so many in America's coal country. Founded in the mid-1800s, it was a modest community built on hard work and black dust. By the 1960s, it was home to more than 1,000 people, families who gathered at church picnics, cheered Friday night football, and knew every face on Main Street. Beneath their feet stretched an intricate web of anthracite coal veins, fuel for a nation's industrial heart. But what made Centralia prosper would also doom it. The fire that would erase Centralia didn't start with a grand disaster. It began with something ordinary, almost careless. On Memorial Day weekend in 1962, workers set fire to trash in an abandoned mine pit, a routine practice meant to clean up for the town's holiday festivities. But this time, the flames slipped into a hidden coal seam. What should have been a controlled burn became a subterranean inferno. At first, no one panicked. Underground fires were known in coal country. They usually burned themselves out. But weeks passed and the smoke didn't stop. Then months, then years. The fire spread quietly through abandoned shafts, finding oxygen wherever the earth cracked. By the late 60s, the ground began to steam in winter, even under snow. Children on their way to school would stomp on warm patches of pavement and laugh until the laughter faded into unease. In 1979, a gas station owner inserted a dipstick into his underground fuel tank and pulled it out, almost too hot to touch. He measured the temperature, 172 degree bars. It wasn't just a fire anymore. It was a monster, burrowing and growing beneath the entire town. 2 years later, in 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's backyard when the ground suddenly gave way. A sinkhole, 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep, opened beneath him, belching toxic gas. Todd clung to a tree root as carbon monoxide swirled around him. His cousin barely managed to pull him out. Had he slipped, he would have been swallowed alive by the Earth's burning belly. The incident made national headlines. Centralia was no longer a curiosity, it was a warning. Scientists confirmed what locals already feared. The fire could burn for centuries, maybe longer than any of us will live. Relocation efforts began, but many residents refused to leave. After all, Centralia was more than land. It was home, memory, identity. Yet the ground kept breathing smoke. Cracks split the highways. Trees died in rings where toxic fumes escaped. Houses sagged and buckled. And at night, some swore they saw strange lights weaving between the empty homes, like lanterns carried by invisible hands. People began to whisper, maybe Centralia wasn't just burning, maybe it was haunted. The sinkhole that nearly swallowed 12-year-old Todd Domboski wasn't just a freak accident. It was the moment the outside world finally took Centralia's nightmare seriously, after national news outlets broadcast the images of the steaming pit and the boy's terrified face. Federal and state officials descended on the small Pennsylvania town. They arrived in crisp suits and hard hats, their voices clipped and businesslike. But when they stepped onto the cracked, steaming streets and felt the faint heat through their shoes, even the bureaucrats hesitated. By the early 1980s, surveys revealed what the residents already knew. The underground fire had stretched for miles in every direction. It wasn't something you could fence off or smother with a few hoses. Experts estimated the coal seam could burn for 250 years or more, releasing poisonous gases and threatening to swallow homes without warning. In 1984, the government made its decision. More than $42 million was allocated for a mass relocation. Letters arrived in mailboxes across Centralia, each one offering buyouts for lifelong homes. Some families packed up quietly, their hearts heavy but resigned. Others resisted, Centralia was their birthplace, their memories, their proof of existence. To leave felt like erasing themselves. Moving trucks came and went. Streets that had once echoed with children's laughter grew silent. The local church bells tolled fewer times each week, and as night fell, the darkness deepened, not because the lights were off, but because there were fewer windows glowing with life. But a handful of residents stayed. Among them was John Lokitis Jr., a young man who repainted street signs, trimmed grass along abandoned lots, and hung Christmas lights on empty streets, small acts of defiance against oblivion. These holdouts claimed they weren't afraid. Some said the danger was exaggerated. Others hinted, in lowered voices, that something about Centralia wouldn't let them go. Visitors began to arrive, not to see a quaint coal town, but to witness its death. Teenagers from nearby cities drove in at night, headlights off, daring each other to walk the fog-filled roads. They carved graffiti on the cracked highway that had buckled under the fire's heat, leaving messages like "Welcome to Hell" and "The ground eats you alive." The place earned a new nickname, the Real Silent Hill, after the horror movie, inspired partly by Centralia's eerie atmosphere. In winter, when snow blanketed the surrounding hills, Centralia's streets remained strangely bare. Steam vents melted the flakes before they could settle, leaving dark, wet scars in the white. Even more unsettling were the stories. Hikers swore they'd seen figures moving through the smoke, figures that vanished when approached. Drivers reported phantom headlights trailing them on desolate roads, only for the lights to fade into nothing. One local priest, after blessing a crumbling house, admitted privately that he felt watched the entire time. "It's not just the fire," he whispered to a journalist. "It's something older." By the 1990s, most of Centralia was gone. The government used eminent domain to seize remaining properties. Buildings were demolished, streets ripped up. Yet a stubborn few refused to budge, fighting legal battles that stretched on for decades. They said the government couldn't take their memories. And besides, they claimed, Centralia had always been a little strange, long before the fire. Some historians pointed out that Centralia was once the site of violent labor, disputes, and unsolved murders, tied to the Molly Maguires, a secret society of Irish coal miners. Old-timers muttered that the ground had been cursed since those bloody days. When the fire roared to life beneath the town, they said, it wasn't an accident, it was the earth remembering. As years passed, the fire didn't weaken. It simply crept deeper, out of sight, still breathing smoke through hairline cracks. Standing on those empty streets today, you might feel a tremor under your boots, a subtle vibration, like a heartbeat in the ground. You wonder if the town itself is still alive in some way, or if something else walks those abandoned roads. Today, if you visit Centralia, you'll find almost nothing that resembles a town. The official map still lists streets, but most of them end in weeds or vanish into the woods. Street signs hang crookedly over nothing. A single row of mailboxes stands by an overgrown road, their owners long gone. The quiet is so absolute that your own breathing feels too loud, yet here and there, smoke still curls from the earth. On cold mornings, it billows in ghostly plumes drifting across cracked asphalt. The temperature beneath your feet can be hot enough to blister shoes. Scientists confirm the fire is alive, moving through coal seams that stretch miles underground, consuming fuel older than human memory. And still, a few residents refuse to leave. In 2013, after years of legal battles, Pennsylvania allowed the final handful of holdouts to remain until death. They live among empty lots, holding vigils for a town that no longer exists. At Christmas time, they still hang lights on power poles where no neighbors remain to see them. It's as if they're trying to convince the world, and maybe themselves, that Centralia hasn't been erased. But strange stories persist. A paranormal investigator named Lily Torres visited the site last year, hoping to debunk the myths. As she walked the buckled remains of Route 61, she described hearing voices whispering just beyond the fog, low, overlapping murmurs she couldn't place. When she played back her audio later, there was nothing but the sound of wind. Yet she swore she felt a presence following her that night, even after she left the town limits. Truckers on the nearby highway claim they sometimes see dim lights moving in the ruins, like lanterns carried by invisible miners. Hunters have reported distant coughing in the woods, as if the smoke itself were alive. And late-night thrill-seekers who come to spray graffiti or film, TikToks tell of a sulfur smell that suddenly grows overwhelming, then disappears completely, leaving behind an unnatural silence. Some believe the spirits of miners and displaced families are still here, tethered to the land that consumed them. Others think Centralia is a warning, a glimpse of a world where humanity's arrogance against nature has consequences that cannot be undone. The ground doesn't forgive. The fire doesn't stop. If you stand at the edge of the old highway on a moonless night, you might feel the heat rising through your shoes. Close your eyes, and you might even hear it, the faint echo of church bells from a town that no longer exists, or the whispered voices of people who can't let go. You open your eyes and there's nothing, only the smoke and the endless black sky. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why people call Centralia America's real-life ghost story. If Centralia's story sent chills down your spine, imagine what else is hidden across America. What do you think? Is it just a coal fire? Or is something more haunting this forgotten place? Comment your theory below. Hit like if you felt the goosebumps. Subscribe for more hidden American legends and histories every week. And share this with a friend who loves a good mystery. Let's keep these lost stories alive before the earth swallows them completely.